Good morning, friends. I'm Bill Correll, and I'm here with my bosom buddy, Ken Caputo, and co-founder of this wonderful podcast, Lighting the Candle, A World That Works. And we're here having conversations, and mostly spontaneously, and always just relying upon our personal experience and training over the years. Both of us have spent a lot of time reading about different things and training folks, teaching and what have you in our businesses and other ways. And we're here, to cause an outbreak of something very powerful and very empowering. That being the case, our measure of whether or not we're getting that done is to feel the empowerment ourselves. And if the conversations are feeling empowering, then we're pretty sure that you're getting some benefit and value out of it too. And that's our ultimate goal here. We want you to leave these conversations that you're participating in actively, listening, with all of your skills and ability, and empower us to say things that make sense to you, and you'll be surprised what happens. I mean, it's almost magical in terms of how you listen for what gives us our cues of what to say. So, having said that, we're going to kick off today, and I don't have a real strong candidate for a conversation today, Ken. And I'm wondering, do you have something? Because I can obviously get the random conversation generator going in an instant.
Well, I guess the one topic that's been kind of, just a lot of conversations I've had has been, what people want in their work. What does meaningful work look like? What is a work environment that feels fulfilling and something that they actively want to participate in look like? And it's just been kind of interesting, just as this great, what you call it, the great resignation or the great reshuffling, where, a lot of people are looking at, something they spend a large portion of their life doing and questioning the value of it. So, so that's led me to thinking a lot about what do we value in work, and has that changed?
I think that's an excellent diving board, no question about it. I completely concur with you that we came from humble origins when we moved from being an agrarian society where you either farmed the land or you starved to death, to being, using the same kind of mentality about going to work as early as you can in life, and finding yourself a job in manufacturing or some sort of service or some type of manual labor at first, and then working your way up. And then somewhere along the way, it got to be a really good idea to have a college education. And so the government got involved with that. But again, none of these things ever started out with, why was I put here on this earth? And what is my ultimate plan for how I'm going to design what my gift is and then give that gift away?
Yeah. And it was always interesting, having worked with a lot of young adults, through the years. One of the things that we talk about, especially when we're doing leadership programs and stuff, was thinking about how to choose the job so the job doesn't choose you. And it always led to some very interesting conversations, because especially when you're starting out, often they weren't thinking about what they thought work should be for them. It was more, what other people had recommended, whether it was a parent or a guidance counselor or just something they thought they were interested in, or they just wanted to start, being employed somewhere and, didn't put a lot, take whatever comes along or is available, So it's just kind of interesting, when we would have conversations that were a little bit more intentioned, it opened up all of these pathways, and thought experiments that, I think could be helpful. And now I feel like, regardless of your age, whether you're a young adult or, in your 50s, it's something that a lot more people are looking at, I think, differently than pre-pandemic.
I kind of agree with you. And I also think that it's a big missing for many, many people. Where they are right now is they feel like, everything has changed. The old world that had that uncomfortable predictability to it, knowing what you liked and didn't like about what's happening tomorrow, but what was your alternative, right? So I'll get up and I'll
Right.
do it again. And that's that old that old saw about people working just hard enough not to get fired, and making just enough money not to quit, right? Until that
Hmm.
something interrupts that dynamic. But while you're talking in terms of the word leadership, it's a very, very powerful distinction because it is a community distinction. There are no is leaders, okay? Leadership is a thought process by which a group decides and designs where it's going. And from time to time, someone gets to be the spokesperson, and it can vary wildly, from which person, if it's
Hmm.
really a cultural leadership model, anybody who has the next best idea gets to say it out loud for the team, to take on board and make even better.
Yeah. Yeah. It's and I guess that's the other thing, as you're saying that, it feels like there's a desire for a more conversational learning dynamic, as opposed to a top down, you know, I provide this service, you do this work. Our relationship is, this kind of, you know, a vertical dynamic, as opposed to something that's a little bit more parallel, but still has, an organizational structure to it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot about that guy, Michael Singer. He wrote I think it was called The Unfettered Soul, and he's got like a big software company, but his whole thing is about spirituality and work. And and his premise is it's not the work's job is not to bring spirituality to you. It's your job to bring your spirituality to whatever the work is that you're doing. And it was kind of an interesting paradigm. And and I wonder about some of the tension that's experienced right now is um, a little bit of a window type thing, where how much time are you spending pointing outward, saying you need to do better by me, pay me more, treat me better, not take advantage, that kind of thing. And then the business owner is doing the same thing. They're like, well, you need to work harder if you want this or that, instead of looking inwards and saying, how can I find personal fulfillment and value in this work that I have right now,
Yes.
for as long as I'm doing it, and for the employer to say, how can I create, you know, uh, an environment in which my employees can thrive, you know, and also at the same time, manage that balance where the business can also thrive. Because, if your employees are thriving and your business isn't making enough money to sustain itself, then, that's not going to be a balanced ecosystem either. But so I just wonder about the perspective people are using and how they're approaching this, you know?
Again, it's almost a tale of two cities. I was raised that it had absolutely nothing to do with anybody else. The big competition was never to be better, stronger, faster, get paid more money than anybody else. It was always to do better than you did yesterday, you know?
Yeah.
And so most of the conversations that I ever had with people on job interviews, I mean, I went in with hat in hand. I walked away from my first year at the University of Colorado with one credit. That's for 12 months, roughly $4,500 worth of cost. It was actually something that I was very much engaged in, and I really enjoyed. It was a credit in golf. So the rest of the $4,500 went to investing in my ability to learn how to be a human being and survive on this planet.
Hmm.
And during that period of time, I got to hang out with some very, very interesting and very successful people, which is, they say it's either an accident or it isn't, but there's also the philosophy that there are no accidents, and all the people that were putting there to give me my lessons were sent there, with that express purpose, and whether I got the lesson or not was up to me. So I learned that the thing to do is to go in and work your butt off, and ask for, whatever job they had available right now. And, this is like so many people started in mail rooms, or they started, cleaning trash barrels, or they ended up going around and cleaning chalkboards and that sort of thing. Well, when I went back to college, my second time, I did all those things. I ran a curriculum lab downstairs at Mohegan Community College and printed all of the, things for the, for the college. And then I also worked in the business office. And then I also went down to the sub base and I cleaned the extension property down there, which was a series of 4 or 5 classrooms that had been set aside so that, Mohegan could have on campus or on sub base training of people that wanted to take college courses. So getting those floors to shine and sparkle just the right way. I was really lucky, to be inspired by people who would say, this is how this has to look when you're done. And then they would demonstrate to me what the finished product looked like, how to wash down the blackboards, which were chalkboards in those days. And it's amazing how much dust would accumulate on them and how much would get all over the floors. And if you're going to do this floor on this base with these personnel, these floors are going to have to shine like crazy. They're going to have to look like good china, So, and all of the desks have got to be wiped down and cleaned up every time that you're here once a week. So everything was very much a specific set of trained behaviors that I could emulate. And they also used the Vince Lombardi philosophy, which, most people, he's a very misunderstood man, probably because a few of his quotes were taken out of context. And at the beginning of his coaching career, especially before he got out of being a college coach and a high school coach, and then wound up, going with the New York Giants, and then ultimately, with the Green Bay Packers, his quote about winning, not being everything, it's just the only thing. I mean, that's the one that most people will remember. But he also said, you and I in our endeavor will relentlessly pursue perfection, and in the process we may find excellence.
Yeah.
So knowing full well that perfection is an ideal that can never actually be realized by a human being for more than moments of a life, being in the presence of perfection is one of those things that's more feeling than it is absolute behavior. Yes.
Yeah. No.
So, but to find excellence, and then what that means is to look around and find out you're by yourself in your endeavor. That there's no competition. The competition every single day is all about who are you being today in terms of being perfect tomorrow. And I don't know. I found that I started as a material handler when I stopped going to college. My wife was close to her degree, and I wasn't. So I went and got a job as a material handler on third shift, at a local wire and cable company. And I'm going to tell you what, I was not afraid of hard work. It took me about 3 or 4 weeks to get promoted to be a machine operator. And then it took, but each time I had a conversation with somebody about where do you want to ultimately end up, I would like to be in supervision. I really would like to learn how to be a great supervisor. And that's what I would always say. And so each time I got promoted to a more significant job in terms of the responsibilities associated with it, running these things that were used in the space program, high temperature extruders and all that sort of thing, and then tape cable manufacture and all the rest of it. These were not things that really kept my attention, to be perfectly frank. So there was this whole fight, of mastering the mundane while pursuing what I ultimately wanted to see happen, in my life. And so there was no way that I was ever going to end up, being in supervision, be with the background and the training that I had, especially in the late 1970s. However, and this is a big however, I didn't know that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I had to change companies and go to work for another manufacturer in the area. And they recognized something in me that had been missed over while I was doing what I was doing at the first company. And they decided they were going to work on me. And they made a community project out of me. Senior management did. And they brought me along, just like I was there as an apprentice to someday be, the head of the division. And whether that ever happened or not really didn't matter, but they kept giving me as much responsibility as I would step up to and do the hard work of mastering it. And then they'd give me more. And then I started asking for more. So
Yeah. Yeah.
this is my personal take at how other people in those days, you didn't show up for a job and say, I'm here, please pay me now. Anything else I do is extra. And oh, by the way, I'll be calling out sick tomorrow and the next day, and I wish you good luck with that. I'll see you possibly the following day. No, that wasn't it. You missed, you lose your place in line, and the next thing you know, somebody else is doing your job.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I think what I'm curious to see is, so there's a swing now where, there's, at least the companies that I'm working with currently, they need people, so there's not an excess of employees and someone waiting in line to take the job. They're kind of fighting for what they feel is a smaller pool, and I'm sure it'll correct itself. But it's, so now you've got a little bit of a shift in the power dynamic. And the other thing that's really interesting, though, as you were talking, was how it feels like it's getting a little bit more challenging to measure excellence. So like, I'll give you an example. In Quester's Way, my COO, when she needed to just kind of feel like she was accomplishing something, she'd go do dishes. She'd go hit the 3-bay, because there was a process and there were dirty dishes, and at the end they were clean, and that was quantifiable. Whereas the majority of her work, you're building systems that you're not going to know how well they're going to be effective. You're not going to see a revenue shift in the work that you're doing for months or sometimes years. It's all of this kind of, especially service based. You're doing a lot of work, you're communicating, you're not just doing things in a vacuum anymore, where your personal effort leads to a direct result. You're working more collaboratively as parts of teams. So it feels like it's kind of harder to quantify what that excellence is and determine the trajectory of the result you're producing, because it's not just your result anymore. So yeah, it's kind of funny. And the other thing that I think is interesting is, and I came up like you. I mean, working a 90-hour week, my first 5 years teaching martial arts, I didn't take a day off. I didn't take a vacation, and I was proud of that. And it wasn't my business. So I was doing a lot of work, and eventually I did end up purchasing it, and was able to reap more rewards from it. But looking back on it, I wouldn't change it, and I wonder if I'd had a different perception of how to be successful and what that looked like if I couldn't have balanced things a little bit better. There were impacts to my health, there were impacts to personal relationships. It strained family dynamics. There are a lot of prices to pay, and what I was told by all of the success literature was, well, that's the price you pay if you want to be successful. And so now I'm wondering, for a lot of people, if you have someone that's their paradigm, and they're looking to bring people in who say, no, that's not how I measure success. Excellence to me is providing you with quality work, a quality result, and also having time for other things that are important to me in my life. How do you balance that?
And it's extremely important. The primary work has to be done. if you don't know, again, that your life's quest is to discover your gift and maximize its potential and then give it away, you're constantly going to be looking around to, to who can you model the behavior of that seems like they're having a pretty good time,
Yeah.
And the success training during our upbringing years, and probably even today, because most of the people that I know that other people think are very successful, they themselves don't consider themselves to be, because, as you said, their wheel with the 5 parts of their life, the family, friends,
Mhm.
finance, and all that good stuff, they're not on a round wheel at all. This wheel is really,
Right. Right.
it's oblong, so they go to different types of interactions with family and church and what have you, and it almost is like it's a distraction from what's driving them in that other area, that they have
Mhm.
no choice to set it down,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
in terms of being truly successful, and the conversations and the training that I do with people, and have done, and really get the most enjoyment personally out of, is the
Mhm.
one where we decide together, you know, what a perfect conversation looks like. Who's it with? Where are you? What are you talking about? How does it
Yeah.
feel? What's the temperature in the room? As vividly and as specifically as possible. And during this conversation, what's being discussed, and what's the level of importance of the outcome of the conversation, and is there an intended result, and just really diving into it the whole way. And people will throw themselves at this exercise, because
Mm.
while they're doing that, they're actually getting in touch with and tapping into their self-expression. They get a moment to really inquire, what is it that gets me out of bed in the morning? You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and Ken, that old saying, where management says those people are not motivated. Well, no, they're dragging their butts out of bed. They're coming in late and all the rest of it. But you watch what they look like when that whistle goes off at 4 o'clock. Bam, they're out in the parking lot in less than 10 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah.
So no, they're motivated. We just don't have the right idea of what motivates them and what would get them to come in here with the same kind of enthusiasm. And that's one of the things I've always admired, on your particular slant on business and creating the workspace and creating a place where people could go. And every once in a while, if they're just not feeling the love, they can go wash some dishes.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
so
And yeah. And just really, we were, one of the things that helped us a lot was getting very clear on what thriving looked like in our work environment. And, and we designed that whole fitting room process was to educate people to what the relationship will look like, if they choose to partner with us and work in our center. So, so rather than, we didn't focus on, I mean, there's the things like the pay and all that kind of stuff and hours, but it was prior to that, it was, this is the type of person that's going to love working here, and it was really interesting because, early on, like for example, this is a chaotic environment with where you have to have a lot of intelligent decision making powers. You're working with kids and families, so so if you need like structure and very clear rules, that and processes, you're going to be stressed all the time. So you can be really capable, very talented, but the environment is going to stress you out. So, and as we started kind of building our, like, I guess you call it, our hiring system around helping people understand that, it made it easier to help people recognize whether or not this would be a good environment for them, you know. And the other thing that really struck me, and this is the other thing I wonder, and this is more on the employer side, like when when I had when I worked for someone else, early on, the martial arts school, and then became a partner. Before I had the really control over things, it was that old paradigm of you're paying rent on the space, and if it's closed, you're losing money. Yeah. So because you're paying rent 24 hours a day, so I'd be in that dojo 14 hours a day, of which really the majority of the revenue was generated in 4 to 5 hours. So, but my old partner was kind of like, look, if you're there and you just sell a patch or one person comes in, that's one more person than you would have had, that kind of thing. So over time, once I was in a position of control, I started rethinking that and thinking, how do I maximize the times when people are able to come and train, and condense the schedule so that we can invest very, very strategically and heavily in the 4 or 5 hours that work best for people, and then have more time on the other side, to do other things like be with family or other, marketing or curriculum design, or donating our time to the schools, which is a lot of what that freed us up to do. So, so when someone asked me, how much do you want me to work? My answer started shifting to the least amount necessary to produce the superior result we're trying to produce. So it's not, if you're working 60 hours and you can do it in 40, that's just working smarter. And it's funny, this is the last thing, it's just kind of, this is a little bit meandering, but I developed, yeah, and this just speaks to how hard it is for people to make that paradigm shift sometimes.
Yeah.
I had developed this compound body martial arts based fitness program called AIM, right? And the point behind AIM was to produce a result. And we allotted 45 minutes for the workout, with the goal being to finish sooner than that. So, and it went through this kind of, it was a cycling thing. So on average, an A week took a little bit longer. And by the time you got to an M week, where you're really maximizing the value, the benefit from these exercises, we could be done in like 32 minutes. And for a lot of people, they were so uncomfortable with leaving time on the clock. Like, I'm supposed to be exercising for 45 minutes. I feel like I didn't accomplish it because I'm not still here. Like, they wouldn't want to leave, and it was funny because it's like, look, you did the work, you stimulated muscles, you produced the result. Go enjoy the extra 15 minutes you saved. Go have a smoothie in the cafe, have a cup of tea with a friend. You produce the result. It's not about the time, it's about condensing and being efficient with the effort. And it was really hard. Some people were so uncomfortable they wouldn't continue with the program. They wanted to work out for 45 minutes, whether they needed to or not. It's just really interesting. So, you think about the same thing in work, is the employer or the employee feeling it's a time-based, and their success is based on how the quantity as opposed to efficiency and quality.
100%. And if you stop and think about it, culturally, isn't that what we were all trained? That's why we went to a manufacturing facility that would take you with no skills, and you would trade your time for money. And as you got better and were more efficient or faster, or could do that in 45 minutes worth of work in 30 minutes, mm-hmm. they'd move you up and put you into another position that would challenge you to grow into that position. However, what we started out talking about is the changing face of the working population, and what are their expectations, and what have they been trained to believe. And what it comes down to is that we have far more of the population college educated than we ever have had before, or at least college debt. More people than ever before. And I guess, I probably felt like I knew something because, when I did apply myself in college, I got very, very good grades, as I had gotten whenever I applied myself in high school. And when I didn't apply myself in high school, guess what the result looked like? So the point is that these days, the expectation is because, and you can make up your own story about, why kids would feel a sense of entitlement, and why more than ever before in the history of our country are folks having kids living in their basement until they're in their 30s and 40s. That's a real thing. And quite frankly, they don't get out and risk. I mean, they might buy a car or something of that nature, but rarely, that group of the population, and I don't know what their percentages are of the whole, they actually are enough to skew, the viability of the whole group in terms of being reliable for people who need to have a countable person doing the job every day. Now, that said, we have a lot of pressure from government to raise what people get paid to a point where if they get paid that amount of money, suddenly they don't seem to have a lot of incentive to do much more. And I've got to say, I've never seen so many people in my own personal experience be so satisfied with a part-time job instead of a full-time job, with a job that's beneath their training and their experience and their degrees, that doesn't pay anywhere close to what they were college educated to do. And you've got to go back and look at the process. I remember, we had the Scholastic Aptitude Test, the SATs and the PSATs, and then we also had the Iowa tests. And we had all this testing that was designed to label us and put us into groups. You have potential for this, you have potential for this, you have potential for this. And it might be, you'll be good in a farming environment, Future Farmers of America, FFA, that's going to be your route. Over here, you're going to go with the industrial route, and you're going to learn how to run machines and maybe take some drafting courses and be able to do that. Over here, you're probably going to be good as a teacher, or maybe you're going to be some sort of a leader, or possibly, run for office someday. And so you're going to go the college route. That was so-called objective testing on a very, very subjective matter. The matter is the question, who the hell am I and what am I supposed to do with this opportunity called life? Had anybody then or anybody now really put the effort and the time into engaging that question with kids, starting at an early age, you need to know that you're special. Not in comparison to everybody else or anybody else. You are the only one of you there is, ever was, or ever will be. And until I think a human being has a sense of their own intrinsic, innate value, that is granted, by their creator, whether that's their mom and dad or a superior force or whatever you tend to believe, until they have a connectedness to the sacredness of their opportunity here on earth, and there's no way to convey that to somebody in a conversation. It has to be conveyed in experience. And I have used several different metaphors in terms of training people how to really get in deep and take a hard look at not their why. And I will talk about that in a minute. You know how I feel about the whole, you'll find your why and it'll always be there for you. And no, it's kind of like, the job. You come to work for the first 6 or 7 months and man, you can't wait to get in there and see what you can do. And then people don't notice what you're doing and whatever. Well, your why is the same as that. You have to stay in touch with what's behind the why, what gets you emotionally charged and valued. Do you remember the movie with Will Geer and Lou Gossett, An Officer and a Gentleman?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So the plot in that is Will Geer is this kid. He's an Army or a Navy brat or something, and he gets raised in a real tough environment, with local, bullies and, getting beat up in alleys, a little bit like the Bruce Lee story, right? Until Bruce Lee says, I'm not taking this anymore. I'm going to become so much better than all these people. Well, he decides that he is going to go to school and become a non-commissioned officer and a Navy pilot or whatever it was, with the goal at the end of it in Puget Sound. So he has to go through boot camp, and the boot camp is designed to break people down. And Will Geer was just always smarter. I mean, because he was very intelligent. It was a shoo-in that he would be able to do the book learning and all that sort of thing, which he had no trouble with at all. His problem was his mental attitude was completely out of phase with being a team member. And he got to this point where he's in a fight, and his drill instructor Lou Gossett is constantly threatening to DOR him, which is to kick him out of the program, and where he doesn't finish and he has no future, in actually in the service at all. So they finally get to this point where they're in a knockdown drag out, and Gossett says nobody's gonna go after you. You can hit me as hard as you want to, and they're doing these kung fu moves and beating the living snot out of each other, right? And then finally, Gossett knocks him on his butt, and he's lying on the ground. He said, "I'm gonna DOR you. I'm gonna DOR you." He said, "Don't you do that." "Why not? I got nothing else." Holy mackerel. Can you even imagine being at that point in your life? I get goosebumps. Now, that was a little theatrical, but I wanted to take you on that ride all the way and not drop you off.
Yeah.
So the whole point is you and I both have had those aha moments, right?
Yeah. And it is it's interesting, going back to people living in their basements and stuff. We had I had several moms that worked for us that were re-entering the workforce, and it's just it was really, really interesting because it was simple math. The cost of them to put their children in childcare outweighed the revenue that they would generate by working. They would basically pay to work, because there's an imbalance there, So, and with Quester's Way, you get to bring your kids to work with you. so that cost was negated, and now they could actually have a net positive by working. And I know I talked to a lot of people that were in situations like that, brilliant kids who went to college and graduated college, and the idea of them being able to go to work for a not-for-profit, doing the work they've been educated to do, have a transportation and be able to feed themselves and have an apartment without a roommate was impossible. It's just they're not generating enough revenue. So we have this not that, and I've talked to many of them, I'm connected on LinkedIn, and I've watched these kids grow up over 3 decades, and they are not lazy, they are not entitled. They simply are in a situation where the math does not work, and they're trying to figure out how to make it work, but the system is a complicated one, and to me that always led from an entrepreneurial perspective, how much more successful does everyone become if no one's that works for you is worried about money? Like, if their needs are met, they can pay their rent or their mortgage, they can go on vacation, they're not, like you, the way I came up was you sacrificed everything, and you just invested all of your time and money back in the business, and and you basically were broke and all the time until you weren't anymore, and then you experience success, and and then when someone else is like, well, you have all these nice things, they don't know the years of sacrifice and effort, but it almost feels like this cyclical, does there need to be a starve to thrive type of thing? Is there a way where everyone can step into a position of support, both financially, in the work itself, in the environment, and then, so now that's not the determining factor anymore on how successful you are, how successful the business is. The determining factor is how well you all work together, so I don't know.
I do, and I really appreciate you, bringing that up, that what we're seeing here now, when my dad started working in the 1950s, most women didn't. Most wives stayed at home and raised children and all the rest of that. There wasn't anything wrong with that. That's just what you did, And most women would get married right out of high school, and very few would go on to college. And the ones that did was most likely because either one or both of their parents had gone to college. But why were they going to college? To meet a better kind of a guy to get married to, right? So what we had was one income made all things possible, and people had very little debt back in those days because there just wasn't a
Mhm.
lot of credit. You could get credit, maybe to buy a stove, for the kitchen, or maybe for, a car. But most people couldn't qualify for mortgage loans.
Mhm.
Not until the GI Bill and stuff like that, where it really made it very possible for a lot of people. So now you go and you fast forward, let's say, to the 70s, and a lot of women are now in the workplace. They're actually out working. And so, funny enough, if the cost of things doesn't go up dramatically between the 50s and the 70s, just over 20 years, and then astronomically between the 70s and the early 2000s.
Mhm.
So again, this is a very real, if you want to talk about something that's a systemic problem, it's that you have to make a ton of money, period, in order to get anything these days. And what's the one thing that almost every college educated kid comes out of school with?
Debt.
A big college loan payment.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
that college loan payment is, it's a noose around their neck until they get it
Mhm.
paid off, in terms of qualifying for a mortgage or something of that nature. And again, like you said, people who are unrelated, have to have roommates, for a much longer period of time, no matter how good their job is, because their net income after all expenses is just so little, no matter how much money they make. So that's a really another good look at the slice of the pie here. And how does that get in the way of people coming and functioning properly, and doing their best to express, their particular gift?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's it's funny how tangled it is. Like our center is a good example. One of the reasons that we recognize that in the demographic we were in, it was not sustainable, and it was going to be the best decision. The hard decision was to close it, was because there was no way we were going to be able to charge enough to uh, and generate enough revenue to support fair wages for the employees we needed to run it, to generate that revenue. There is an imbalance. And and for a lot of companies, if they started in one place 20 years ago, 40 years ago, even 10 years ago, now they're stuck. How do you pivot this? And a lot of times I think there's a misconception. I've in talking to people that, especially if they're not in business, they're making an assumption that there's someone at the top that's making a disproportionate amount of revenue. And in large companies, that can absolutely be the case. The executive team can be raking it in. But most small businesses, I know I was making less than most of the people working there,
Yeah.
as the president and owner of the company. And I was fine with that because eventually, either it was going to make more money or it wasn't. So, and I would share in that. Um, but I mean, like one of the things that we've looked at is, when we're vetting locations and, markets to go into, it has to be able to sustain the revenue generation we need to pay our team well. And if it can't, that community doesn't get it. It doesn't get Equester's Way. It doesn't get all of these cool things because it has to be sustainable. And we're starting with that approach. So, but if you don't, you go in there, you're making money, and then you're just cutting it up and hoping it's enough to satisfy the people that are working there. And either you end up understaffed, people end up underpaid, and now either you have to raise your prices, which people may or may not pay, or you don't. And so you end up in this with this weird kind of knot. So so it's just kind of interesting listening to kind of the, just for lack of better words, the right versus left perspective on this. I think it's a more complicated thing than that, and I'm not quite sure where the resolution is. There's obviously the hope would be there's enough resources and money for everyone to like in a meritocracy, be successful proportionately without anyone like starving to death in the process. So, but how do you do that? And are we experiencing right now, going full circle in the workforce, almost like an overcompensation to feeling like the workers have been disempowered and now they're going to take that power back. But in the process, how do they do that in a balanced way without disproportionately impacting, like all the small business owners I know that are not millionaires? They're not, they're actually probably making less than they would make if they just went to work for somebody else, with their skill sets. So it's an interesting conundrum. I'm curious to see how it all plays out over the next few years.
Well, I'll tell you what. You're familiar with the old saying, "Figures don't lie, but liars figure." And there's a narrative that people who want to get other people to do certain things will spend a lot of time and energy telling them stories that in the end, it turns out they're all made up. They're really not based in any fact whatsoever. And the fact of the matter is that when that involves government, and government now puts these requirements, and there isn't the will to push back by the business community against those requirements. Like, for instance, when I was, I don't know, the first time I got paid minimum wage, I think it was $1.25 an hour. Now, minimum wage jobs were about taking something on that you hated. I mean, it was seriously had to do everything with, I need the money more than I need the self-value, and more often than not, it was a job that really didn't soothe your soul. It was something that, that really didn't make it a lot of fun to go to work in the first place. However, at the end of the week, you work 40 hours, you got $44, not too shabby. And they didn't take an awful lot out, for taxes and Medicare and Social Security back in those days, because there wasn't enough there to, to really worry about. So that said, now we live in a time where that's not the case any longer. It's not the case any longer. And as we have consistently raised that, the ceiling of the basement, okay, as the ceiling of the basement keeps going up and up and up, it puts us at a great disadvantage with the rest of the world, which is why our jobs have been unceremoniously exported by corporations. You talk about, big companies can do that. And then the whole idea that in a company, there's always this group of people at the top that are making, amazing money compared to everybody else there. In some cases, 2,000-3,000 times, the least paid person in their corporation. And so, the reaction to that coming out in the news is to give everybody a $15,000 bonus, or whatever it is. But the neat part of it is to have government tailor, golden staircases for some of the companies so that they're above ever having to pay a single dollar in tax. Guess what? You know how the great industrial barons of the 1800s were able to amass fortunes? They didn't pay tax.
Yeah.
They went out, of their own volition, and they created hospitals, and they created, fire departments and school systems, and they did it because their employees needed it. As Quester's Way, bring your kids to work. Well, they did the same thing. You had Pullman, and you had Hershey, and you had all of these great guys. I call them the lower end of the multimillionaire spectrum back in the day, but they wanted to make sure that absolutely everybody had all their needs taken care of. They even created the company store where people had credit. They could go and they could get goods before they had earned the money. And that was all an account that was maintained, by company personnel. It's not that world anymore. And this doesn't make sense to an awful lot of people, actually. And it's those people that are questioning and actually getting involved with looking at where can they go, that they're not going to feel like they have to change jobs every 2 to 3 years or more often. There are a lot of people that are changing jobs yearly. I don't remember this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually, it's kind of funny, because we've had, like in our martial arts school, people stay for years and years and years. But then in Quester's Way, it was much more fluid, and one of the things I found interesting was we kind of enjoyed the flow through. And really our goal was, we would kind of talk about it as like an employment superhighway where, you get on the highway, we're going to help you come in and you're going to drive along with us for a while. And our main goal was that when you leave us, you're further down the road.
Yes.
Like we've left you with skills that you can apply. And I hear back from people all the time and how, just like little thank you messages and stuff about how the things they learned help them, at their next stop. And, it's kind of interesting. I mean, I don't know. It's the humans accumulating skill sets that's more important than, staying in one place. Like I think loyalties to, I'd rather see people who are loyal to doing good work than they are to a company that may or may not be the best environment for them to do that good work.
Yeah.
And some companies start great and then they're not great. And,
Yes.
so why should you feel like you have to be stuck there for 30 years just because it used to be a good fit for you? When, and it's like, it's funny, it's what products sell, the products that the most people are attracted to, what businesses should thrive, the businesses that the most workers are attracted to. That would be an interesting expression of capitalism, if that were to happen. And, so instead of feeling like you've got to be in a crappy environment because it's just suck it up and that's what you do if you want to get paid. It's like, no, what if we start really feeding our skill and our attention and our passion into companies that deserve it,
Sure.
So I love right now B Corps and Benefit Corps. I think that's I'm actually working on a startup right now that we're going to form as a benefit corps that we can get B certified.
Nice.
And you look at companies like Patagonia, where it's not a shareholder driven company. It's a purpose driven company. They're trying to be environmentally, they have a lot of environmental objectives that they're trying to achieve. And it's a cool model. There's a skincare company I was just learning about called Caldera that, they do like mainly like face washes and tonics and stuff like that for men or whatever. But it's all, they just got their B certification because they work with small private farmers for getting like the plant extracts that they use. And it's all very environmentally conscious. It's cool. So, and when I mention that, especially to, the people that I know, like in their 20s and 30s, they're really attracted to going to work for a company like that.
Yeah.
And if they're compensated well enough to meet their needs so that they're not stressed over how they're going to pay their bills, they're going to be amazing contributors to that company until they're not. And then they're going to take all of that, what they've learned, and they're going to inject that energy into another company, making that company amazing, and wouldn't it be cool if that was a flywheel that started spinning,
Yeah, it's an interesting way to look at things, and we've seen the ebb and the flow between the picture of the lion on the wall that's underneath it. It says the customer is the king, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then through the 80s and early 90s, it was all about employees. Let's make sure that our employees are the best fed, the best trained, the best compensated. Because if you take care of your employees, they'll take care of your customers. You won't have to worry about it. Well, unfortunately, all slogans are not equally applied, in different businesses. And sometimes the slogans are there, to give management a place to hide. It's like the decisions. One of the companies that I worked for before I just started my own business is they would always say all of these customer care things, but our on-time delivery percentage was, I don't know, 18%. Somebody would order something from, it's custom. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
We know that. And we got problems with lead time deliveries and supply chain problems as we're shifting from Japanese production back to the United States and European production back, all the rest of that stuff. Customer care, man, customer care. Then we'd sit in meetings and say, okay, so what story do we tell the customer? We've
Yeah.
kind of run this one out of gas. We told them this for 3 months now, and they still don't have their product. And I sat in those meetings and I thought to myself, um, we're saying one thing, but how we're really operating the business is another. But they also had the slogans about treating the employees well, and customer is king, and all the rest of that good stuff. And you know what? They didn't know any better, did they? They didn't know any better.
Yeah.
We're at the point where there wasn't enough cultural integrity to say, these aren't the things that you do in public and then you do something different in private and then you're cool. No, we had to learn, I think, as a population and as a culture, that who you need to be is the same person saying the same things in all areas of your life until they work. And when they do work, I mean, that's the payoff.
Yeah. The other thing I find interesting, and this is something we're playing with a lot right now, is the if the focus is on customer, or the focus is on management, or the focus is on product or service,
Yep.
it feels like you're sort of missing the point. Like, what we focus on is the relationship, the dynamic, ever-changing relationship between those things. And that's what's important. I mean, when I first was running a martial arts school, had a couple hundred students in 800 square feet of smelly carpet, and it wasn't a great facility, but they were great students, and I was a great teacher. And and then very quickly we realized that the limiting factor was the facility. So we had to start looking for ways to upgrade the facility. And then when we did that, that created more space. But what had been, what it was the interaction between those things and how that evolved. Because if we just got a bigger space and then became a lousy teacher, or attracted the wrong students for what our purpose was, it all would have fallen apart. So it was how these things dynamically interact, and respecting that as something that's fluid. It's, you don't just like put it in place and hit the go button and then step back and go fishing. It doesn't work that way.
Well, I have to just kind of go back to a company that I worked with about 4 years ago, and they were growing. I mean, they had been an 8-person company for years and years and years and years, and then they were a 22-person company, and they just couldn't quite get to 50 somehow. And they really needed to get to 50. I don't fully understand what the motivation was, or what that was all about. But the main reason that they couldn't get to 50 is because they had people quitting at the rate of 3 to 5 a month.
Oh, yeah, that'll do it.
So, so they're out there hiring people. They're paying stupid money for people who have great resumes, but they're having them do things that you probably could pay somebody $25,000 or $30,000 for, and they were paying them 80. Because they had state of Connecticut loan dollars, that were guaranteed. If they hired people, it was for a particular period of time, and if they didn't work out, no harm, no foul. So, all of that said, what my advice is, I got a good idea of how you can stop losing 3 to 5 people a month. And they looked at me with rapt attention, and you know what my answer was? Stop hiring 3 to 5 people a month.
Yeah.
Fix what's broken here.
Yeah.
Find out what you need to do to be able to keep this core of 40 or so people that are actually getting the work done, and stop trying to add, 3 to 5 people a month because the state of Connecticut loan basically tells you got to.
Yeah.
Fix the system.
Yeah.
Stop churning people through this defunct system, and it's not going to go any better, guys. This is what it's looked like for 2 years. It's going to look like this from now on.
Yeah, I always think about that. I think it was that book Upstream. and one of the quotes from it was, every system is perfectly designed to produce the result it's currently producing.
Yeah.
So if you don't like the output, it's the result being produced, you got to look at the design,
Yes.
and figure out where the changes need to be made.
My favorite, you remember Pogo? It was a comic
Yeah, yeah,
strip.
yeah.
And my favorite Pogo is where they're looking at each other, these animal characters, and one says to the other, "We have met the enemy, and day is us."
Yep.
With all of that said, it's never about trying to do something that's not working faster. It's always about looking to see what's missing, um, what needs change, what needs to be replaced, what needs to be stopped, what needs to be started, all of those questions. And if everybody in the company is coming from there, well, they got a stake in the outcome, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah, they do.
Especially if they get listened to, especially if they get followed through and their ideas get put into practice. And when everyone knows that their ideas, it's safe to voice ideas out loud, you'll have a core group of people that'll stay with you for 5, 7, 10, 12 years. The ones that are leaving is because they have life changes. Because the system works, it supports them, it gives them what they need to be successful and effective in life. Back to that success thing. That success thing is equally important for every last person, who gets out of bed and goes and does work for other people.
Yeah. 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 The trick is figuring out what success means to you, so, and not letting it be, you can take input from outside sources, but in the end, that's going to be your own personal determination, and otherwise, I mean, if you're not clear on that, then you're going to fall prey to, what other people think success should look like for you, and that might not be the right hill for you to climb,
Or you might decide that you're not ever going to be successful, so why bother trying?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the heartbreak. Far too many people do not have possibility in their life. And I guess that's another conversation for another day, my friend.
Yeah, no, that opens a whole nother rabbit hole to climb down.
Absolutely. So anything else in conclusion?
No, I just think, well, I guess the main thing that just strikes me out of all of this is, if we're all asking the question, how can we contribute to helping this I don't know, organization, group, whatever it is, whether it's a business or a family, how can we contribute to it thriving, so that our personal our personal value and unique gifts are part of what allow everything to thrive in balance, not just you, so it's not sacrificing all of who you are to something else, but it's also not, kind of taking it all and letting it figure it out. It's being part of creating a balanced, thriving system. That's the question that I keep asking. Yeah.
I love it. It's the Three Musketeers, all for one and one for all, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Exactly.
Another way to language it is we don't have stars. Everybody's a star. What we have is people who take turns doing the corporate decision making because we all trust and honor each other's opinions.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a
Seth Godin, Linchpin, his book Linchpin is a great one for that kind of mindset and approach. Yeah.
Well, excellent. We have managed to sit here and chew the fat for another hour, my friend. And
There we go.
really enjoy our conversations. And I guess we're both smiling, ladies and gentlemen, and hopefully you are too, because if nothing else, I want to challenge you to go and take a hard look at your life. And as Ken and I said in the beginning, bring the beauty, bring the self-expression to whatever it is that you're doing first. Don't look for somebody else to bestow that on you as a gift, because that's not their job. I'm
Nope.
here to tell you it's your job. Bring it with you. All right. Well, thank you. We are lighting the candle, a world that works. And thank you again, my friend Ken.
You're very welcome. See you next week.
Yep. Adios, everyone at home. Be well and go out and thrive and love each other. Bye for now.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works, part of the Xvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us each week, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.